Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Spring 2026 New Jersey Film Festival Filmmaker Q&A series. Today, we have a wonderful filmmaker here who's going to be talking about his amazing documentary, B.F. Skinner Plays Himself. And I'm also going to be telling you about how to buy tickets and how to get more information about our festival, which is celebrating its 44th year. That's right, 44 years. I started this back in 1982 as a graduate student, and it's been a labor of love to bring independent film to New Jersey. And as a result of the pandemic, we are still a hybrid festival because we had about 30 to 40 people who watched just about everything during the pandemic, and they were from all over the United States, a few people from outside the country as well. So we didn't want to exclude them. So the way that the film festival works, it will be screenings on the weekends between January 23rd and February 22nd. And films that are playing on that day, almost all of them will be available online for 24 hours on their show date, beginning at 12 midnight Eastern USA time. And there will also be in-person screenings for a lot of the films, and those are usually at 5 p.m. or 7 p.m., depending on the date. So stick around at the end of the Q&A, and I'll show you how to do all that. But Theodore Kennedy's here. We call him Ted, right? Ted is okay?
Yep. hmm
Ted is the maker of this film. B.F. Skinner Plays Himself. And for those of you who are not familiar with this very famous psychologist, he was all the rage in the 20th century. He was also very controversial. And Ted's film does a really great job giving us an overview of his life, as well as some information and some images that we've never seen before. So tell us how you got into this project, Ted.
well, I was interested in Skinner starting in my early 20s based on my curiosity and my own opinions about free will and being told by my father that I sounded like Skinner the way I was talking about it. So I had to go read Skinner, and found it is interesting his point about us being shaped, controlled by our environment, and free will being an illusion. And I hoped to find a documentary about him. Looked around and there wasn't one, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll make a documentary about Skinner to fill that void.
Hmm.
20 years later, I'd maintained a kind of curiosity about him, and but had become an experimental filmmaker and was thinking more about a intentional community that had started based on his novel Walden 2. And this intentional community, they had written letters to him back and forth. So I was thinking about some kind of epistolary film using footage from the intentional community called Twin Oaks and the letters back and forth. And in that research, came across unidentified 16 millimeter film materials in the finding aid, which Harvard had preserved,
Hmm.
where his archives are. They knew what they were. They were the raw materials from educational films in the 70s that had been donated, but they hadn't been restored or kind of organized in a way that was accessible. So,
Hmm.
with my curiosity being an impetus, Harvard put these materials all together. Um, and as I understood, reading more about the letters between Skinner and the producers, as I understood the dynamics that were going on there in Skinner's hopes and the kind of failures of the project, that really was the initiating of conceit of the film, was to make the film that Skinner should have made, or that he had hoped might have been made, or
Hmm.
some reimagining of those materials in a uh, that I, in my opinion, deals more closely with the issues that were really at stake at the time and now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really amazing some of that footage. I must say, backing up before I became a cinema studies professor, I used to work in the media center, which provided 16 millimeter films to be shown in class. And of course, I booked a number of films for psychology department courses. And there was one called B.F. Skinner Behavior Modification. And I never watched it, but I booked it all the time. So I knew it was
Mhm.
very popular. So I did do a little bit of diving in since I also was interested in Freud and some psychoanalytic, writings from my graduate studies. And then I stumbled onto him again. And then so I think your film is really an eye opener. And I like the way that you put it together in the sense that it's not in a linear timeline, although there is somewhat of a linear, like you tell us about, his beginnings, how he met his wife and his children. But I think what I like most about your film is that it's like a quilt where you've been
Mm,
able to take these disparate elements and bring them together to create a kind of cohesive whole. And then we have this wonderful footage. I love the footage of the Dick Cavett show where B.F. Skinner is on the left side, and on the other side you have Dennis Hopper, just fresh off a Easy Rider, obviously, and they're talking about free will versus control. And I mean, some of that footage is, just is amazing. And I guess that's my next question.
mm,
Cobbling together all of this information and finding it must not have been that easy, at least in good quality, because I know there's a
yeah.
lot of that out there. How is the archival process set about?
Well, Harvard had quite a bit, which was great. I mean, the film couldn't have been made without what Harvard had preserved.
Mm,
Then there's a number of educational films that are accessible that Harvard had or that I had acquired through different means, just from film libraries or from eBay, that
right,
kind of stuff. Then the television appearances, like in the 70s, like the Cavett one, that comes from the Cavett archives. And what's funny is that a couple of people who were familiar with Dennis Hopper that had worked on restoring the last movie, specifically Jonathan Marlowe and Mike Plant,
mm,
when I'd spoken to them about the Skinner film, they would insist. They would say, "But you know about the Cavett appearance with Hopper, right?"
mm,
Um, and that's how I became familiar with it. And Laura Coxon, who is an archival researcher that worked on the film, she found the Cavett materials. There's also an earlier Cavett appearance, which is in black and white,
right.
that is the Cavett archive doesn't actually have. It's the kind of exists in some YouTube back corners, but it's been lost to time, and so that quality is terrible.
Yeah. But it's still
Which
good. It
does its
still
own
gives you
thing, yeah,
insight, and the way the mainstream, media and the mainstream personas, they still didn't have a clue about this man and wanted to kind
yeah,
of keyhole him as a leftist and as ultimately a control freak in his own right, which I think he
yeah.
probably was to a certain
Well,
extent.
he's not easily defined in the sense that his ideas were both um, ap- appropriated and feared by both sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
And he kind of falls into this um, worst or best of both worlds category. In terms of him being a control freak, he's again, I think hard to pin down. On the one hand, he was had extreme attention to detail, and then on the other, he was very flexible and open-minded about his own scientific practice,
Mm,
and would chase down different ideas. And the way that his lab ran, you had to believe in a certain set of principles, like organizing ideas around how behavior worked. But
right.
given those, the impression you get is that you could kind of follow your own interests.
Mm.
In terms of how he controlled his image, I think that's what the film is a lot about. His maybe failed attempts at trying to control
Yeah,
how
yeah.
he
I
came
mean, I
across.
think
So
that's very true. And I think, the development of this way to steer bombs and, some of these things that he was sucked into during the war or around that same time were really
yeah,
fascinating. And I also just remember one line in your film, can machines replace teachers? And I think we're there now, so he was way ahead of his time with
yeah.
with kind of sniffing that AI is in the picture. And I guess that's what's so brilliant about him and your film, because you impart this information to us that I'm sure many lay people don't know anything about.
Yeah, I mean it's all there in his writing and in his own speculations and other people's interpretations. But it is dropped. This relationship between him and AI, I am confused about how it's not more. um, more formally, uh, concretely discussed,
Mm.
a lot of lay writing that says, "Hey, this stuff looks like what that Skinner guy was saying back in the day." And in fact, like a foundational component of AI is reinforcement learning,
Right.
and it's not. And the whole concept is Skinner's notion of how reinforcement works, and through that um, rewarding and punishing of a behavior, you teach the agent.
Right.
Um, but for whatever reason, in AI, Skinner actually isn't that. Uh, I'm surprised that he's not considered more of a philosopher around those issues than like Minsky, or someone who understandably is obviously referenced quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's I think he'll uh, the claim, one of the claims of the not within the film, but like in my kind of project, and the reason for the film to exist, is that he's like Darwin in the sense that he will be appreciated at some point. There will be some mechanical, uh, physical understanding of the world, which will prove in practice the theory to be correct, in the way that genetics kind of prove natural selection to be the most reasonable explanation for how evolution works.
Mm.
And that equivalent will probably be somewhere in neuroscience. And it's like where this intersection of neuroscience and AI, I think, are kind of coming together. And I'm of the opinion, among other people that I'm just following, but
Mm.
that Skinner is the equivalent to Darwin there, and that once those things are formalized, it'll all point back to Skinner as having kind of predicted
A
this
precursor
relationship.
and a
Yeah,
prescient
yeah,
psychologist who felt that this was coming because there were computers in his lifetime. I
yeah,
mean, they were
yeah,
rudimentary compared to
yeah.
what we have today. But can you tell us a little bit about how this film was? Okay, so you came up with this idea to make the film. Tell us about the timeline and how it came to be. How long
It
was?
was,
How long did it
yeah.
take? And
That in total about 10 years.
wow.
It took 3 or so years to get all the material. So what Harvard had was loose trims, outs, work prints, a kind of mess
Mm.
that they'd inherited. Archivists there, specifically Amy Sloper and Liz Coffey, spent countless hours reorganizing those just to be able to get them to be scanned. It would have been impossible to sort of restructure them physically into the order which they were produced. But once they were scanned, we then brought them back into a digital space, cut them up again, and reorganized them to recreate essentially the dailies.
Mhm.
From there, that took a few years. So then from there, and the people that worked on that were Alex Lazarevich, Kay Hanahan, and Mary Helena Clark. That extensive work then allowed us to actually just watch the material. There was sound that we could then match. Um, During that window of time, I went down a bunch of rabbit holes and had a lot of terrible ideas, and it was almost dangerous. I should have just done nothing instead. But the the trajectory, like the chronological elements that you recognized, are present, and that the film has more of a narrative arc than the educational versions that existed. But through working that narrative arc, it then became trying to find he repeats himself a lot, understandably. He's out there giving his argument.
Right.
So this shows up in these films, videos, a lot of audio recordings of talks he gave, interviews. So trying to find the best or most precise versions of his articulations, and then assemble them into a structure that follows his intellectual development, essentially. Um, Starting with rats at Harvard, and then going through the pigeon work,
Pigeon.
and then moving out into more of like the public impact, and his that correlates directly with the rise of the public intellectual in 20th century culture, and the rise of media as a uh, format for communication
Right.
of ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, and then, so that 3 years, let's say, of archival digitizing, 3 years of I actually also did a bunch of interviews of people in the community, presented at behavior conferences on the kind of finding of these materials. And then the last 3 years, let's say, was really around editing and trying to find a structure, a container that really worked. The basic idea was really the same as at the beginning, which is make the film they should have made, try to stay as uh, contained to the archival materials as possible.
Mm,
So there's most things are from our pre-existing sources. Some images aren't, but everything else pretty much is.
mm.
And let those speak. Let Skinner speak for himself, I guess is the
Yeah.
overarching
So then the
principle.
last 4 years was assembling it, and then you had to deal with the pandemic, which probably was a good time to kind of start putting together some of the stuff, or
Unfortunately, not my job didn't get me any time.
oh,
uh,
food.
so yeah, at first I was very excited about this opportunity to be forced to stay home and have nothing to do, but
Hmm.
that
But
didn't
then you
work
had
out
stuff
that
to
way.
do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So how long was your first cut of this film? I mean, your film is about 75 minutes in its
yeah.
final form.
There, there were a couple. There was an essay version that I made, which was about 85 minutes, which was
Mm,
just me actually narrating using still images and some clips of the material that had been collected.
mm,
And that was around 2018. And it was kind of a proof of concept for being able to get feedback from people on the behavioral ideas, like the psychology itself. Um, and so you could say that was sort of the first cut, but I think of it more as like a visual storyboard or something, or like a moving image storyboard.
mhm.
The the cuts really began with two different assemblies that were 8 or 9 hours each.
Wow.
One was an assembly of all the footage from the Blake film that Skinner participated in.
Right.
And then the other was everything else. And those were set up chronologically, um, and by a mix of chronology and then topic. And from those, I just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller.
So how many edits do you think you ended up making? I
The
mean,
problem with
uh,
digital technology is it lets you make far more.
as many as you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, I would say there were uh, probably 5 or 6 clearly distinct kind of stages cuts in the last few years. Um, but um, they were really I don't this final version that we arrived at, I don't distinguish too strongly in terms of like a cut from the last 3 or 4 really. I mean
Mhm.
it
You're,
was
you're tweaking it.
moving some things around,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I
But
got you. I guess I really like the way that you incorporated the Blake film because normally a filmmaker would lop off the stuff that you would never see in a film. So there's a lot of meta aspects to the making of your movie too. We're part of we see the way that you were part of making the film too, as there's a film that's being made at the same time. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect. And I could see where you have that experimental background because that's a real, it's kind of risky to do that. But I think our jury just absolutely loved the way that you were able to bring all this footage together, show the uh, stuff before the clapboard and the
Mhm,
Skinner telling you, no, no, I don't want that, and where he
mhm.
kind of is involved in the editorial process on the spot. All that gives you so much insight about the man as well. And then I also love the footage of the daughter who talks about, there was this very big
Yeah.
controversy about him using his kids as part of his experiments, and he would lock them up in this, I don't know what a container with a opening, and she didn't seem to have any trouble with it, but unfortunately, it seemed like many people did. So the footage that you assembled, and once you came together and it all kind of worked, was there any other aspect that you would like to include, or is there something that you would like to remove after you finished it? I mean, as a filmmaker, I know I look at my film like 6 months later, oh shit, I should have cut that out. I wondered if you were going through that right now, since it's kind of in the can, so to speak.
Yeah. just a side note, it froze up for a second. So if there's any delay, I apologize for
No
that.
problem. I think we're
Um,
good.
okay. The There's a ton of material that I would have wanted to include that I could imagine working in like a different cut that is a lot more observational.
Hmm.
Um, and almost more of like a structural experimental film or something
Hmm.
that it but it would be for a different audience essentially. It'd be just a kind of different beast. um the there's material with that Cavett interview. He's talking with the one of the other guests is the reporter whose name I forget, who was the only one permitted to communicate with the prisoners at Attica.
Right.
And this relationship between, and the reason that Skinner's appearance on Time magazine got delayed by a month was because of
Because
the
of Attica.
Attica uprising.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole vein of cultural criticism of like related to the bigger issues at the time that just it has to be inferred.
Hmm.
um so I think some of those explorations would have been really interesting, and then a deeper dive into Twin Oaks and the
That
intentional
could be a film by
communities.
itself. I think that could be
Yeah.
a film by itself. I mean, Twin Oaks
So,
was a commune
and
and
it's still around.
it's still around. That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a catering company around here called Twin Oaks. And I thought, I wonder if this man was part of that commune. So
Yeah.
anyway, what I'd like to do now is just share screen and show our audience how they can buy tickets. And let's see how I can do this. Do it this way. I can make this bigger. So normally our old website is njfilmfest.com. It's still our website, but everything would have been here as far as you would, click on a button and everything would open up and you would see the website for the festival here. But because of the pandemic, we are now partnering with a streaming provider called Eventive, and we've used them for the last 5 years. So when you get to our homepage, njfilmfest.com, you go to this first image, which is tickets info button underneath New Jersey Film Festival Spring 2026. You click on it, and that opens you up to our bona fide website. The website has everything that you need to know. This is the welcome page. And then there's basic information, but if you are planning on coming, there is going to be a parking link where you can park for free on the university lots that are mentioned in this section. And so the welcome page is helpful and it's something that you should always keep in mind. There's also a very vanilla schedule that has everything listed in textual form, old school. And you can see that B.F. Skinner Plays Himself is our opening film, which is a very prestigious spot. We think this film is the cat's meow, and we think it's really an important film. So you're our opening film, and
Cool.
Ted will be there to do a Q&A with the audience too. So if you want more, you can definitely come and interact with him at the live in-person screening on that day. So you want to click on all these buttons. And if you want to go back to the original, you go up to menu, you hit welcome, and all of these red buttons have some juicy information here. The film guide gives you a breakdown on each film. And basically you just click on it and you get basic information and also a way of how you can go to see the movie. You go back to the welcome page and you click on, well, it'll be under tickets. And that'll open up our catalog page, which is where you want to go if you want to buy a ticket. So you'll hover over the image and this window will pop up, which says pre-order now. If you've never come to our festival, you need to register, which takes about 30 seconds. And then you can buy tickets. You have to buy tickets one at a time because we need individual email addresses to stream the film to you, because each ticket is good for the in-person screening as well as the online version. And in fact, we have some crazy people, yes, crazy people that watch the film during the day and then come to the screening in-person one in the afternoon or evening and interact with the filmmaker that way. I mean, we have a lot of cinephiles that come to our festival, and that's the way that you can get more for your money as well. Access Pass, which is $120, it's basically half price. And so if you're going to see more than half the movies or the programs, you want to get that because it's worth its weight in gold. Individual programs are $15 each. And yeah, it's a really great thing. We'll be doing this from the 23rd of January to the 22nd of February. And Ted's film is the opening film. So we should be, I don't know, it's a great kickoff for our program. So
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Al. I'm really excited.
yes, and we really, really are working with the psychology departments at
Oh,
Rutgers. I mean,
cool.
it's a no-brainer to do that. Hopefully they will bring their students too.
Yeah, great. Good, some good questions.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you will. There's some challenging ones, I'm sure too.
Yeah, ideally.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to meeting you in person. And thanks so much, folks, for watching our Q&A series. There'll be a few more of these, so make sure you check them out. They're all available on YouTube. Thanks again, Ted.
Thanks, Al. Take care. See you soon.
Okay.